Hey everyone, welcome to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Sage Hobbs, author and creator of Naked Communication, and I'm so psyched you're here. This show is all about taking charge of your life in new and inspired ways to create a life you deeply love. It's about being more you in all areas of your life, more courageous, more free, more alive, more naked. I'll be sharing stories and advice from amazing people around the world who are up to incredible things on how they are successfully breaking free from fear and old patterns in order to create incredible relationships and impactful lives so that you can do the same. This is the place to be inspired to live a courageous and naked life. Let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Naked Conversations podcast. I'm so honored you're here. If you're a new listener, welcome. If you are a loyal fan, thank you for always tuning in. It means the world to me to have this conversation out there and making an impact in all of your earbuds. This is episode 48. You can find the resources and show notes mentioned in today's show over at sagebhobbs.com/episode-48. Also over there on the website, you can learn more about me and my work, my book, how to stay connected to me. And if you're interested in getting some personal letters from me a few times a month, as well as when a new episode becomes available, you can sign up over there. You'll also get this great guide that is called How to Ask for What You Want. So simple, right? So hard to do. So the guide is a really useful tool to actually get us in touch with what we want and how to effectively communicate that with the people in our lives, from our loved ones to our colleagues and bosses, so that you can really show up powerfully and lead effectively and make the impact that you want to make. So all of that is over on the website at sagebhobbs.com. Today's guest is extraordinary, and I'm so excited to introduce you to her and her work. I was really pumped during today's conversation. I just could not get enough of the wisdom and the humility and the groundedness of Dr. Melody Moore. And I can't wait for you to hear her story and about the way that she is igniting impact in the world through her work. I really believe that when we listen to each other in this way and we really look for leaders across all sectors and industry who have a focus on social good, there is the opportunity for us to be inspired and to take action ourselves to make the impact that we want to make, regardless of what that looks like for each of us. So Dr. Melody Moore is a social entrepreneur, a licensed clinical psychologist, a yoga teacher, an author, and a speaker. She's the founder of the Embody Love Movement Foundation, which is a nonprofit whose mission is to empower girls and women to celebrate their inner beauty, commit to kindness, and contribute to meaningful change in the world. Can we just say that again? Because that is so, it's everything that I want to see happen on the planet, which is to celebrate inner beauty, commit to kindness, and contribute to meaningful change in the world. She's trained over 20 trainers and over 500 facilitators to activate the mission of Embody Love Movement across the United States, Europe, and Australia. Her work has been featured in numerous publications and media outlets. She's a National Eating Disorder Association advice columnist, and she was chosen as one of the 100 most influential global leaders empowering women worldwide. This is somebody whose story resonated with me deeply, just on a level of honesty and nakedness, integrity and authenticity, and a real commitment to being of service. So I can't wait for you to check out this conversation with Dr. Melody Moore. Let me know what you think. You can always email me, sage@sagebhobbs.com, or send me a message over on Instagram. I really, truly love to know your thoughts on the conversations. It means the world to me, again, to get this out there where it's free to listen for anybody who has access to the internet. Thanks so much for tuning in. And here's Dr. Moore. Hi, Melody. Thank you so much for joining me here on Naked Conversations. I'm really excited to hear from you.
Absolutely, Sage. I love the name of this podcast. So I'm open for naked conversation with you.
All right. Oh, good. Because that's what it is. And the title is like a little bit edgy for some people. So I knew that we would be kindred spirits if you're already feeling the vibe of the title. That's awesome. I am super psyched to have you on the show today. I have been exploring your work and am really inspired by what it is you've managed to build and create and share with the world. And I heard about you through someone that I really deeply admire, Seane Corn. Like, she was speaking of you so beautifully and she was about to go speak at your event. We're going to talk all about that, your work. But it was really with such earnestness around how you are real and smart and truly committed to being of service and making an impact. And when I heard her share about you in that way, I was like, I've got to figure out who this woman is and invite her to participate in the show, because that is the perfect intersection of what this is all about. Can we be real and can we be of service? And can we be honest about what that takes? So thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a treasure of a lifetime to have Seane Corn as my very best friend. And I've heard her talk about me those ways, and my heart just like leaps out of my chest. I'm so grateful. And it's a beautiful reflection of how we see ourselves in each other, because all those things she said, she's talking about herself. She just happened to be, right? She just happened to also see that reflection through me. So I'm grateful.
Yeah. It's also, I wish that we could see it in ourselves though. Maybe we'll get into this, but it's like, I can so easily drill down and see the beauty and the spark inside of everyone else. And sometimes we just can't capture that in our own essence. So, it's just an interesting thing for us to explore.
Definitely.
And she feels the same about you. So it sounds like it's a win-win. So when I asked you what topics you'd love to address today, which I ask all my guests in the guest form that I send out, you listed several, and every one I thought, oh yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh, that one, totally. So we'll do our best to get through all of it. But the one question that I always start with, because I just find that this is like sort of the essence of how we can show up powerfully in the world, is what does courage mean to you?
The first thing that comes to mind is how everyone's teacher, I believe, Brené Brown, described to all of us in her now famous TED Talk that courage comes from the root word kore, which means heart. And I love that description of living wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. And to me, that means bravery. It means being authentic. It means integrating all the parts of who I am and who I've been so that nothing is left out and that the whole of me is what's presented, not the pieces I think you might accept or the pieces I think that wouldn't cause you to run away or be terrified or reject me, but all of it, and holding it all with as much tenderness and as much compassion. So courage is simply being true to who I am.
You say that actually incredibly eloquently. And yes, Brené Brown is many of our teachers in her new book. I just bought her new book, Dare to Lead. I can't wait to see how she takes all of this and applies it to leadership in a bigger way. But the essence of it is being true to who you are in all of its parts is so simple, and yet it's so hard, I find, for most of us to walk that path. So I'm excited for you to maybe share how you got there with us a bit today. Let's just do that. Let's just go right there. You have two components to what you do. They seem interconnected from what I can gather. Can you start by telling us about your work with the Embody Love Movement and how it came to be?
Definitely. I founded Embody Love Movement 8 years ago. It came from a culmination of being a therapist in private practice and knowing there was something more I wanted to offer my clients who were in recovery from the range of eating disorders, body dysmorphia, negative body image, and just general not-enoughness. And my own journey as a yoga practitioner and as someone who was coming into my own integration and my own healing, my own self-acceptance through the practice of yoga. And actually enter Seane Corn because I attended an Off the Mat Into the World intensive, a leadership training that year. I think it was 2009. And the culmination of what occurred there in that 1 week, which I entered in with such arrogance, like, what are they going to teach me? Core wounds, really? I'm a psychotherapist. I've been doing this work.
Right.
Now I got my core wounds. I'm covered, right? Yeah. And I went in and my heart was just burst open, like, oh shit. This all is so much deeper than I could see. And I began to put together the threads, right? Just like sutras, like the threads of not-enoughness. And I could see how my dharma was headed in this direction of layering what I understood from being a psychologist and what I knew in my body from being a yogi. I wasn't a yoga teacher yet. That I could offer these girls that I had been the therapist of for several years. And they were in this therapy group together, these teen girls who were all recovered from their eating disorders, which is sometimes referred to as like a unicorn. Like, that never happens. Nobody recovers. But yes, in fact, they do. And I had a whole group of them who were recovered. And so I came back from that off the mat into the world training. I literally wrote a curriculum on no joke, a barf bag on the airplane on the way home. It just like poured through me as I think
when
we're open, that open, just vessel, like let it come. It just poured through me. And it was like, and done. And I offered it to that group of girls. So it combined a way of getting them into their body and a way of connecting to themselves to a bigger purpose outside of themselves. This is no longer about your own recovery. This is about the way that you're going to impact other people because of the struggle that you've had and because of the resilience that you've gained. And so they took it and did what I hoped would occur. They created a way of sharing it with the junior highs that they had gone to, their campuses. They took it back to their sororities. And so Embody Love Movement kind of like burst forth. I think I've been pregnant with it for longer than I knew, but really it burst forth like through me and through this group of girls in recovery, and very quickly became something that spread across the country and then to several other countries without intention or strategy, to be honest. It was like always happening ahead of me, and I was a little bit running behind, trying to keep up with the need for this kind of work in the world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So first of all, I have to unpack several pieces there. I spent 10 years as a middle school counselor, and I also have a master's in counseling psychology. You have a PhD, so you get the doctor, which I should call you that doctor more. We should give women their proper accolades. I feel such a heart connection to that work because it is such a profound struggle. And actually, a lot of girls and women don't recover from eating disorders, or they carry still along with them this piece that you mentioned about general not-enoughness, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to talk about two things, the general not-enoughness, and then also the starting of a movement and how you did that. Because a lot of people have great ideas, but there's fear that gets in the way, or they don't know how to execute. The how gets in the way, right? So let's start with that first piece, which you sort of said it quickly, but actually on your website and in your work, you share it a little bit more deeply. And I love this idea of just, what is this general not-enoughness piece about?
I feel like we all set up conditions of worthiness. We all set up conditions of acceptance for ourselves. And whether they're coming from being a participant in a broader context that's selling us not enoughness by the media culture that's shaped by white supremacy, that's shaped by capitalism, that's shaped by individualism in our country, that we get fed in most countries, first world countries, that we get fed the message of not enoughness, or if it's through misattunements from parents or being perhaps bullied or rejected as a child by a peer group or sibling group. However it happens, for most of us, we end up ingesting messages that make us feel as though we are not enough. For me, I had 3 big hits. The first was being born a female. It was being born a daughter to a dad who desperately wanted a son. And I was his last shot, third of 3 girls. And my dad was very overt, unintentionally, but we know that impact is different than intention. Very overt in talking about his great disappointment in not having a son. And so I feel like I had a birth inheritance of trauma around, I'm not enough because I'm not male and didn't please my father. Here it is. And then I was part of a family system that celebrated and was celebrated for external beauty and thinness. Again, unintentionally, my mom really emphasized her own worth being based on her beauty and her size, which was very small. My mom had undiagnosed anorexia. My sister then developed anorexia. And so I had this I'm not thin enoughness that really became such a battle for me, as you mentioned, in middle school and in high school especially. I didn't know about therapy, so I had to battle my own way out of that one, which was not sufficient enough. And for me, I felt like I was not enough because I was not straight. And I was raised in a family and community that was born-again Christian, who really felt as though being gay was a direct sentence to eternal hell. And it scared me to be gay and to know this about myself and to have to come out. So for so long, feeling like I wasn't enough, I wasn't lovable enough because I wasn't heterosexual. Those are just some examples. And if you or like anybody listening has different examples of their own not enoughness, we never have to have the same content. But the feelings are so similar that the shame wells up within us. And these deep, entrenched thoughts and feelings of, I am not lovable, I will not be accepted, I do not belong, take over. And I think to the extent that we then begin to disown and reject parts of ourselves, so we don't even feel like we belong to ourselves. And then we're just sitting in this not enough stew, which breeds comparison. It breeds perfectionism. It breeds all the things that don't allow a gateway or a portal to be connected to ourselves, to each other, or to the divine within us.
Yeah, that's so beautifully and eloquently stated. And what I also love about the examples that you gave, first of all, every one you gave, my heart went, oh, like I could feel the little girl. Like I have a son and a daughter, and I could just feel that inside of me. Like, yeah, those are a collection of slights that aren't necessarily intentional. You said impact is different from intention, right? And your examples also ring true in terms of those who are listening. Like, it doesn't have to be huge, the things that make our stories what they are, Like, I bet your parents were also quite loving.
Exactly.
And that if you asked your mom, she never would have wanted you to hate your body. She would have said, no, I want you to love your body, And I recently had another woman on the show whom you two to know each other's stories. She shares really powerfully about leaving her Mormon faith and being raised in this very traditional practicing Mormon family. And one thing I love that I feel both of you can speak to is you can have messages that don't serve you and that make you feel shame and non-belonging, and simultaneously experiencing love and care and safety. It's just interesting, dynamic, I think. And so I just love that you were able to pull it apart and see who you became, and then sadly had to dig yourself out of it because you didn't know what therapy was. I'm sorry for that. That might have been an easier path.
Totally.
But there can be this duality of experience. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, we're adults, so now what do we do with it? Right?
That's right.
For those who are listening, I am convinced, at least this has been my experience, and I don't know what you think, in my work as a counselor and now as a coach, every woman struggles with this to some degree. I just haven't found one yet who's completely liberated from it. We're on a spectrum of a continuum, if you will, of really getting our worth and our value. But I have worked with incredibly accomplished, smart, bright, passionate, seemingly altogether happy women who still have that internal dialogue rear its ugly head sometimes. So what does that look like in your work and now in the work that you're doing with girls, how you approach this not-enoughness challenge?
That's so true. One of the things that just came to mind as you said that is, I think part of the reason seemingly very accomplished, have it all together women continue to struggle with not-enoughness is that our shadow, our unconscious selves continue to become more sophisticated and more seductive the harder and the longer that we work. At least that's been my experience. So
more seductive. That really resonates with me.
Right? It's not like we check off the box, like, okay, I went to enough Perfectionist Anonymous groups and got it resolved. Right? We just stay in the curiosity. We stay in the navigating the parts of ourselves we can't see. At least that's the place for me. Every time I get to a spot of like, okay, self-acceptance, check, another layer is revealed. So to go back to the beginning of what you were asking, I think one of the things, for me that I can do is use that word and, that you talked about the duality. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. My parents were awesome. I wouldn't have traded them for any parents. I get why they were assigned to me. That's in my belief system. And I truly celebrate their individuality, their creativity, their generosity, so much about them. I deeply appreciate and wouldn't want to change. And things happened to me as a child that never should happen to any child, right? Both can be true. And part of that, to me, is just holding this understanding of everyone is doing their best with the resources and the tools and the level of awareness that they have at the time. And that could be extremely limited. So it could mean that somebody's best looks like being a severe addict and causing, physical sexual abuse. And that's their best at that moment because of all the reasons that have created that situation for them. So for me, a lot of it's like holding both and getting out of and helping clients get out of the right, wrong binary that doesn't really allow for any opening or any understanding or any curiosity. Since these things took place, how can I now use my past experiences to build resilience and to build connection.
Yes.
We can't undo it. But since this occurred,
Right.
What now?
And what now? Exactly. Exactly. And I love how you introduce these ideas of non-binary exploration and curiosity, because I think that's where we really trip ourselves up, is when we really get fixed in what we perceive to be reality, when in fact it might be conditioning or perception. What else could it be? What else could it mean? What else could be possible? What else could be true? Right?
That's right.
So this introduction of exploration, and that would make sense with really seemingly altogether high achieving, accomplished women, right? That we want to understand things, right? And we've been good at understanding things. So it actually takes a degree of effort to sit with discomfort.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Nikki Myers, who you may have had or will have on your show too. Nikki Myers says, we're all addicted to the way we process information. And I feel like that's so powerful when you let yourself sit with the truth that you are addicted to the way you process information. I see it this way because I'm deeply committed to seeing it this way.
Right.
Especially then when we get stuck in things like a victim mindset and we can't see past the limitation of that.
Right. First, you have to even see that there's another way to see.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like even what Nikki Myers says, you first have to get that we're going a little deep here and philosophical. Hang in with us, people, for a second. Hang in. But you first have to even see that there's another option for how it could be seen. So that's, something that I talk about is like, it's like a nanosecond where we make up some story about what happened or what, you know what I mean? And if you can break it apart, right? Like this morning, my kid screamed at me because I'm a horrible mom, blah, blah, blah. This didn't happen today, but this happens other days. So I can, in fairness, use this example. And I could take that on, right? Like, oh my gosh, I suck. I have no patience. I have a fast trigger to anger or whatever. All the things I do to myself when I'm feeling like a bad mom or a failure in that area of my life, right? Or I could be like, I forgot his coat, which is really his responsibility. And that's what happened. Like, you know what I mean? It's like the coat was forgotten. That's all, right? What happened though was like this whole thing around I suck for me. That's what I made that mean. Anyway, it's like until you can parcel apart what happened in your childhood, that your parents chose to be Christians who practice a certain degree of how the world is. That's what happened. And now who you are now is like a new expression coming from that because you were able to separate the two. Does that make sense?
Right. And certainly I can't see it all. But again,
right.
That's the binary of they were right or they were wrong because that makes me one or the other. And it's just so limiting. It doesn't allow for any kind of connection. Yeah.
It doesn't allow for connection and it doesn't give space for curiosity for a third way, really. Mm-hmm. So the Embody Love Movement, it's only been 8 years. I mean, it looks amazing. From what I can gather, I'm already in love with it and the work that you're doing. And I'm just curious. So you had this idea, you wrote it on a barf bag. First you got, as one does. I've written things in very weird places, so I get that. But first you went to Off the Mat into the World with Seane Corn. I just want to let people know that was the training you went to, and I can put a link to that and to Nikki Myers and such in the show notes.
Absolutely. Those are my girls.
Those are your girls. Awesome. You weren't even a yoga teacher, which I love. You did this training before you were even a teacher, and it like ripped you open and off you went to the barf bag, and then boom, thing happened.
And then it happened.
It seems so easy and natural and organic, but I'm sure that, there was a path there. Can you walk us through? Because I feel like a lot of people dismiss these dreams or these visions or these callings before they even give them a chance to have legs.
Yeah. Well, I think of it as the dual attempts of effort and ease, of Variegya and Abhyasa, right? Like I had been efforting toward being the best person I could, falling in love with myself, integrating, practicing integrity with what I said and thought and felt for a long time.
Yeah.
So the fact that it manifested rather quickly was because there was this iceberg underneath of inner work. And that I don't think it can be quantified. I was like, but right, it was years in therapy and years on the mat. I hadn't taken a yoga teacher training, but I had been studying the practice and the philosophy of yoga and meditation by that time. By the time I was 32 then. I started practicing yoga at 23. So, I had been doing my work.
The soil was fertile.
The soil was fertile. And then I think there was just a portal of opening. all I could see at the time was that first step of the proverbial staircase. And I do think that there is an amount of faith that comes in, faith to whatever one might perceive as source or higher power of, I can only see this much. And I have found in my life and through my journey with Embody Love Movement that I really get in the way of what's possible when I over strategize, because I will miss it. I'll miss the miracle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I will really limit what's possible because I decide I want it on this timeline, or I want it in this place, or with these people. And here, like, the universe is going, no, but we're going to blow it up if you'll get out of the way. So for me, it's more than anything, like these last 8 years have been a process of me leaning back and me getting humble and letting other people show up, bringing people in, accepting help, accepting support. It has so not been about me with my fist in the air, leaned forward, and I've got this. It's actually been the total opposite. And in the moments when I've been that person, it's like halted, or it's taken the movement backwards.
Interesting. Okay. I love that. It's been humbling, and it's been an invitation for participation and for people to help this movement unfold.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have very little talent, really. I
highly doubt that.
I am great at, right? Like, I mean, I think it's just true that we can own the things about us that are skillful and that we're masters over. And I can do that. I am a great facilitator. I think I'm an okay teacher. I love talking in front of other people. I love offering therapy. And around there, I like writing. That's about where it stops for me, right? I don't have any skill in organizing, not detail oriented. I'm terrible at, like, there are so many things that I just don't know how to do. I certainly don't know how to be the executive director of an organization and run a board and keep up with taxes and accounting and marketing. And I am not very tech savvy. Like, I'm just being truthful.
Right.
I think that's really necessary for all of us to be able to name, these are the pieces I cannot hold. And how dare I? Because when I think I can hold all of that, first of all, I get in the way of somebody else being able to do it and show up. And that may be their talent or their skill or the thing that they find joy doing. Why would I try accounting when there's somebody who's just like blessed with math and really wants to offer that to a project that we both believe in, right? So I really think a lot of it's been that is just the humbling part of like, yeah, I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much to know and to discover and to find. I can't design a t-shirt. Like, I don't know.
Okay. When you put it in the context of all of that, I'll let you lead with that. You don't have that many skills, because I was like calling bullshit on that because I can tell you're brilliant. But I hear you when you say what it really takes to run an organization. It's like you germinated the idea and the passion and the structure for the program that you then offered to the girls. But to really catapult it around the country and around the world, you had to receive support in areas where people had talent that you didn't have.
That's right. And you too. And then I would say, like, stage 2, maybe of humility was letting go of the feeling of, the illusion really of, I'm the only one that can offer this, right? So for the first 4 or 5 years of the organization, I was traveling around the world and doing facilitator trainings consistently, right? A couple times a month, I was going to a new city and gathering a new group of women, well, I think 16 and up, and doing a facilitator training so that those women could become Embody Love Movement facilitators and take the work into their community. And despite the fact that we weren't growing at a pace greater than, about 150 or 200 women per year, I was in the way of seeing I could train some of these women to do the trainings and then get out of the way, and then it would scale, much faster. And probably better, because a lot of the women I had trained had done more workshops than I had and were perhaps more skillful or differently skillful than I was. And so that was another moment of just like, it was so humbling. Like, of course I need to do a train the trainer. I'm coming up on my 3rd one next month. So now there are several other women doing trainings. And that was a piece of it too. That sounds really simple in retrospect, but at the time, I just lived in this illusion for a couple of years of like, this is getting really hard. I can't keep up with the desire. Hello.
Right.
Other people can do this too.
But there's something there about trust, right? Like trust and control.
Absolutely. Big time about control.
And where do you think that fits back into this thread of enoughness?
There must have been a part of me that felt like I'm not enough. I'm not enough to get out of the way of this. If I think part of my perhaps identity, like, had been placed in the label of I'm the only trainer, I'm the founder. Like, what is that? That's completely the opposite of what we're offering at Embody Love Movement, to allow women to empower themselves. And I wasn't empowering my own facilitators to step up and step in. And I think the control piece, it was layered.
Yeah.
Part of it was the quality really mattered to me, right? Like, one of the things I was really afraid of happening was people being trained without whatever I saw as though I can play God and see it all, but whatever I saw as just really having the capacity to facilitate well and in a way that would be truly compassionate with trainees coming in. In my experience, my own self-love and my own self-compassion, my own capacity to be gentle and tender with myself comes from having gotten it so wrong so many times and have had to work through self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
And if I had never created a shame spiral for myself, I wouldn't know how to claw my way out of it and have this capacity for empathy for me. And so it's really me seeing, like, when I would look at a potential trainer, that's for me, that's what I was looking for. Like, how compassionate are you with you? Because I know that's like the amount of compassion you're going to be able to offer out.
I really get that it's scary. I just want to say that. I just want to honor the experience that, it's really a skill to facilitate something well with a deep amount of empathy and compassion. And when you have this thing you love so much, it's hard to let it go, and to sort of trust that other people can step into it. And what a beautiful offering that was on your part to invite others to be able to lead this work.
And I love this piece of it, right? What we sometimes can't see on the other side of that is I have been so fed personally. I've been so served from giving it away.
Yes. Say more about that.
I always quote Nikki Myers, and then people end up telling me, like, yeah, that's not Nikki Myers. That's an AA saying. You got it from Nikki Myers.
AA does have a lot of really profound things.
Beautiful things to say. But Nikki says to me, you can't keep what you don't give away. You can't keep what you don't give away. And that has been the truth, right? I probably would have lost it, or Embody Love would have somehow folded in on itself, the scaling of the movement, this revolution that begins within, that allows girls to find their inner power, to in-source self-love. That probably, I just couldn't have continued the pace on my own.
Right. No way. Traveling all over the world.
Absolutely. But giving it away allowed me to see, like, I've never felt prouder than, like, having, for example, our leadership summit and having the facilitators and the trainers come together and watching the trainers lead workshops. I feel like a grandmother.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. You can see the through line.
Yes. And that's
beyond you.
Totally.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. It reminds me of this Indigo Girls line in a song that says, if we ever leave a legacy, may it be that we loved each other well. I mean, come on.
I know that Indigo Girls line. It's beautiful.
So that's one piece, one gift that I didn't see when I was in the illusion of clinging to, I'm the only one that can do this. And the other is, it really freed me up creatively to be able to offer other things, to be able to teach about forgiveness and compassion, to be able to teach about integrity. So it freed up my time and it freed up my creative energy to be able to share other aspects of wisdom. That's so fun and energizing for me. So I didn't see that availability. As long as I was staying in my smallness, if I'm the only one that can teach this, that's all I could teach.
Right. Exactly. And that's all you could teach. And everything else you had to offer was not yet released to the world.
That's right.
And I wanted to say this idea of smallness is so relative, right? Because I'm sure that there are some who are listening who are like, wait, what? How could you ever call that small? You created this movement. It was, it's deeply needed. Body image and self-love is huge. And if we can teach teenage girls, what's that going to mean for the future of female leadership? But I just want to circle back to, there's always the next iteration, right? Like, you got to have this thing continue on and then continue yourself to create and contribute in other ways by giving yourself space.
Absolutely. Because as a human being who efforts toward being present, it's not that I've moved past issues of body image. That's always, I think, always up for me.
Right.
Especially as the body is the language of time. the body ages. So I always joke, I was to a point at like 26, 27, I was like, I actually look amazing. I got this. And then I started aging. And now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, oh yeah, I don't have it. So not so much.
I know. Let me just pause right there for a second because I'm 41 and I have had 2 children and I really have to catch myself. Like I'm really trying to be vigilant about what I say to myself when I pass the mirror or after I get out of the shower or when I put on, certain outfits or clothing. Because I notice how insidious it is. I think of myself as someone who pretty much likes my body and feels happy in it. And had cancer when I was young, when I was 23, like there was a way in which that really shaped and informed my relationship to my body. Like, okay, it kicked ass for me. Like it fought for me, At the time, I didn't feel that way. I felt like it failed me. But as I grew up, I realized it showed up, and here I am. Here I get to be alive, right? So even with that profound sense of perspective at 41, I am noticing myself still having that dialogue that sort of bubbles up. So I just appreciate you saying that you can be so far along on the journey, you in your case having devoted your life's work to it, and still have those thoughts come through. So what would you say to women who are listening who that's still really present for them? They're still really, either they're deeply in it and they're, they haven't yet found a way to love who they are and what this physical shape is, or they're further along, but they still find those surprise attacks. That's how it feels to me. It feels like a surprise attack.
Yeah.
I'm feeling good about who I am. I'm psyched. I have a great partnership and we've got a good sex life. You know what I mean? And then I'll catch myself side view in the mirror and be like, whoa, it feels like a sneak attack of
whoa, and where did that come from?
Yeah. Like an inner mean girl moment or something.
Yeah. And there's so many roots, especially if you talk about the range of people's in the beginning of a journey of self-acceptance and then folks who really have been in this work for a while and get the sneak attack. I had one of those a couple of weeks ago.
Good. I'm not alone.
Huh?
Right. What? Right. Exactly.
It's nice to be at a place of almost to be able to laugh about it. And wow, okay, we're still here. Yeah.
Right.
I guess advanced in the journey in whatever way that means. I think to reframe it for myself, I am a person who believes that when looking backward at things that have already occurred, and I already mentioned earlier because I am a trauma sensitive person.
Yes.
Things do happen that should never happen to any human being. And we have a way of folks who are on a spiritual path or a self-evolutionary path of trying to understand for ourselves what now, right? Again, how can I use what has occurred in my life as a way of understanding the teaching or the lesson for me? Not that I created those circumstances, but since they did occur, how can I evolve because of them? And I believe if I look at my body the same way as a teacher, it's not only this vessel that's holding my soul, first of all, it's not who I am, but second of all, if I can understand it as a teacher, as part of the way that my soul is experiencing reality in order to evolve, then for me, I can look at things like how the aging process is occurring in my body with a little bit of levity and appreciation, and definitely back to that word curiosity. Why this? How is this challenging my soul? The fact that my skin now is crepey and it didn't used to be, or my whatever the thing is, perceiving is negative. Why this? Why now? How am I meant to grow because of this, not in spite of it? And that might be height, it might be ability level, as you mentioned, it might be disease.
Right.
It might be skin color. What if we actually took the frame that our body arrived in and used it just like we do a tool, a lesson, just like we do, why this family, right? Why this socioeconomic status? Why this relationship? Why this situation with a boss that fired me or rejected me? If we're on a spiritual path, we're always opening those questions and getting curious about them. And I feel like a lot of us have held out the body as this separate entity and not to be opened up and curious about how is my soul challenged by this? How could I evolve because of this, not in spite of it? How can I use these circumstances, the circumstances that my body's offering, as a way to grow, as a way to find more connection, more empathy, more presence?
So this is some pretty deep stuff that you're sharing if people are new to this idea of the language of spirituality or soul, right? And I just want to invite whoever's listening to use whatever language works for you to get to this essence of what I hear is brilliant, Dr. Melody Moore, around, again, curiosity. How can we learn? how can we learn or get curious about the experiences we had that may have not have been at all our fault, which, by the way, I love that you say that. I hate in the personal development space any confusion around that we made those things happen to us or we called them in or whatever. Like, I just thank you for saying that. But things happen to us, and sometimes they're super shitty and unfair and wrong. And then can we get curious, though, about where we can go from there? And maybe they have afforded you an unbelievably powerful opportunity to teach and connect because you've had an experience that other people can learn from.
That's right.
Right? But it does take me to this question around integrity. And I know you mentioned that that's one of the things you teach and talk about. And it's something that I have thought about a lot and is like a core value of mine. I consider myself sort of in the personal development and leadership space, right? And I've been on this path for a long time. I literally did my first transformational workshop when I was in 4th grade. So I was like 10. And my mom was a trained therapist. And then they both went on to be executive coaches in the transformational oncology space all over the world, right? So like I was kind of entrenched. And that doesn't mean we didn't have our own stuff, because every family does. I was really lucky. I got tools early on that were sort of just par for the course of our conversation in our household. And yet, when I left school counseling, which I did for a decade, and I entered this work of generating my own conversations and book and podcast and really putting myself in there kind of as a, I don't know if I like that word, thought leader, but like in this space, right? I started to really get clear that I wanted to be discerning around who I learned from and who I wanted to be mentored by because of integrity. I just feel like sometimes we act like it's easy in this space. We act like it's easy to figure these things out, or there's like some shoulds around what spirituality means or how it should look. And like, I think it can look different for everyone. And I think it's a forever journey. Like, I don't think you have epiphanies or ahas and then you've arrived in the promised land, if you will. I think like we're always waking up, and then we're waking up again, and then we're waking up again, right? So I just wonder if you could speak to your perspective on what integrity means and how we can just do a little bit better at practicing it, not like in a righteous way, but how can we get a little bit better?
Sure. My perspective on integrity means integration. It means integrating all the parts of ourselves, the disowned parts of ourselves. And that may be a part of ourselves from our childhood that's stuck in a neediness or in a longing or in a desperation or in a terror. And that may mean a part of ourselves that we just aren't willing to bring along and to expose to particular people or in particular situations. They mean a part of ourselves that we don't even want to see, that we're in denial about ourselves. But when we can integrate, when we can go, yep, that part of me that wants to be a superstar, you're here, you're welcome. That part of me that feels like I'm a piece of shit because I was a bully in high school, you're welcome, you're here. That part of me that doesn't want to be kind to animals, that feels this like urge to kick a dog, you're here, you're well, whatever, right?
Right.
We can bring in these parts of ourselves and say, you too, you're welcome here too, and begin to integrate and to see we have every capacity within us. We have the capacity to be all kinds of asshole.
Right.
And
don't we though?
We have the capacity to really embrace and to own our inner awesome and to reflect that to other people, but it's all there. And for me, whenever I'm in denial about, I could never do that, it's probably about 2 or 3 steps down the road, I'm that person.
Right.
Just in judgment over if I haven't already been. And then I have to fall on my face and get really humbled and come to understand. So for me, one of the ways that integrity has helped me not to fall on my face is to beforehand go, yeah, no, I get it. I'm not that person, or I haven't done that action, but I understand on some level. If that was the level of awareness I had, if those were the tools I had available, I see how that act out occurred.
Yeah.
Like, that could have been me. Sure. Because how dare I not say that? And, one of the really obvious places that's happened in my own life is I had an affair. I was married. And when I had an affair, I broke my own heart.
Yeah.
I have obviously broke my ex-wife's heart and our family's hearts, but I really broke my own heart. And, 13 years later, with all the forgiveness that's taken place, one of the most important pieces of my own work was finding integrity. Because if I had had integrity available to me then, obviously I wouldn't have had an affair, and I wouldn't change anything today because of who I've become since that circumstance arose on behalf of all of us, really, ultimately. But wow, then, right? Because I felt so far out of integrity. I mean, it was like a dissociative, which means just totally out of body for listeners who don't know what that means.
Right.
And totally unconscious. It felt like I was split between two people. The person I was being when I was living out this fantasy and the person I was at all other aspects of my life. And I really got to see, like, this is what out of integrity feels like. I want to know what it feels like to be in integrity. And I'm going to do everything I can. And I mean, staying vigilant about it so that this never occurs again, because this is heartbreaking. It's devastating. And now I can be really grateful that I got to feel the consequences of being so far out of integrity, because it's not ever a place I want to be. It is not a place I want to be. And as I was in my own like self-recovery from that circumstance, I got really clear about facets of my life that weren't in integrity that I had never really noticed, like money.
Mm-hmm.
I got very clear that I didn't want to be in debt, period, ever, to anything. Because to me, it became obvious that's not really mine. I'm borrowing it if I had bought something on a credit card. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So that makes it a little bit more concrete, right? Because when you say you had an affair, which by the way, I think it's incredibly brave and courageous to just share that. That's an example of integration right there. You being willing to share with the world, in my opinion, hey, this is a part of who I am. I followed the seduction. I followed the desire in a way that wasn't clean, right? For me at the time, because I was in a committed relationship. That is integrous to be so forthright about that being a part of your story or your journey.
Mm-hmm.
For those who are still sort of understanding this or playing with this concept, back then, 13 years ago, if you had the distinction or the understanding of integrity, you said you would not have found yourself in the situation of having an affair. What would you have been able to see for yourself? Would you have been able to see, like, I am not happy in some part of my partnership, or I'm not sexually satisfied, or be desired? Like, what would have been the things you would have been able to see?
That's right. I wouldn't have even been in the neighborhood that the affairs happened. Do you know what I mean? I would have been like out of state for sure. Because so much has to go on to lead to something like that. And again, if an affair is not something you can identify with, find your own example, because I think that we've been out of integrity with ourselves, most of us. And that just happens to be mine. And I'm glad it's so egregious, because I think it drives home the point.
Right. Well, I think it can happen every day.
Totally.
Actually.
Totally. Well, I think to answer your question, I feel like part of integrity is being embodied, is being present to sensations as they arrive in your body so that you can know what you're feeling. So that you can
dig into that a little bit more for the non-yogis. What is embodiment?
Embodiment is actually, to me, it's what it sounds like. It's taking the shape and the form literally in your physical body that's congruent with what you're experiencing. That's how you're feeling. So when I was grieving my dad's death, my embodiment of that grief looked like a shuffling gait, much like Parkinson's. It looked like shrunken shoulders, a hidden heart, a neck that was bent down, a gaze that was shifted down, couldn't make eye contact, right? I'm grieving, and the embodiment of that grief looks like a turning inward and a closed heart. And being enraged, an embodiment of that rage might look like a fist pump up and a clenched jaw, because you're mad and you look like you're mad. You feel angry. Right? An embodiment of an open heart might look like a broad smile and wide eyes and outstretched arms and a softness, a soft feeling in the body, an open-hearted feeling in the body. Might feel like a sunbeam or something.
Yeah.
So being embodied means that your physical body is congruent with the emotions that are happening. And to me, that is part of integrity, because if integrity is, and I think it is, where your head and your heart and your gut, and I'll add, and your groin align, then you're acting in congruency. You're not saying one thing and doing another thing, right? So another way of saying that is what I think and what I say and what I feel are in alignment, and that alignment leads to the choice about what to do next. What's the next right step? Beautiful.
What you think and what you say and what you feel leads to the choice of what you do. That's a beautiful way to bring it all together. That's how integrity looks in action.
That's how integrity looks in action. And so back to your question, had I recognized I'm unhappy, had I recognized I'm actually enraged, I'm furious about some of the actions that are taking place, had I been speaking up about those or setting boundaries and taking care of myself, I would have left the marriage instead of acted out.
Of course.
Really simply, right? Like that would have made more sense. But I'm denying my anger and I'm denying my rage. I was more invested in what it looked like to the outside. This looks pretty on paper. This looks really good together.
Right.
I'll keep this up. That's out of integrity. It doesn't matter.
Right. It's just pretense. Right.
Yeah.
And that's how we're conditioned to present. So it's tricky. And you'd already broken some norms, right? Like by having it be same-sex partnership. And, so then it was like a whole other level.
That made it easier, but it didn't.
Okay. So I want to just shift back to something we started with around impact and contribution. So in my work, and really the heart and soul of this show is to inspire others, particularly women, to do meaningful work in the world, to make an impact. And then I add a layer around also to have their relationships be workable, that like these things don't have to be exclusive of each other. In fact, I think when you have really sustaining relationships, you're more able to do meaningful work in the world because, you can show up more fully. But what I really encounter is a lot of what we've been talking about already around like fear and holding back and playing small and not really like leaning into that bigger expression of our impact in the world, particularly again for women. And so I love that you identify as a social entrepreneur and you have a nonprofit and I believe you have a for-profit practice. And I just wonder if you would speak a little bit about why you identify as a social entrepreneur, what that means to you, and what you see as the importance of women's like sort of stepping up and stepping into having a greater impact and leadership role. That was loaded. It was several questions.
You can see me think like,
I know. Sorry. I have a tendency get excited and I say them all at once.
Yeah. I saw a book on social entrepreneurship a few years ago and I was like, that's me. I just identified with the word. I've always identified as an entrepreneur, like in high school, right? I was part of like, I don't remember what it was called. I think Entrepreneur Club or something like that. And the reason for that is it was handed to me in my family system. My dad built tennis courts. He was an entrepreneur. And when he went bankrupt, he like sold pizzas. He sold churros. He put addresses in paint on curbs. He was not going to work for somebody else. And that was my example.
Got it.
So I just like, yes, I was in private practice the second I got licensed as a psychologist. And that was just me.
Right. So you identify with the entrepreneurship piece from childhood.
And then social is like, yes, that's right. Like my heart's desire personally is not to make as much money as I can, although I'll take it. I'm not mad at that at all. I think all the money should be in the hands of people who are going to spend it consciously and wisely and support other causes. So like I am all for making money. And what I do though, how I really spend my time, if I'm right in integrity, is finding ways to help other women find their power, find their voice, make change in the world, similar to your mission, although in a different form. And so I want to change the way that our culture looks at women. I want to change the way that women feel in the culture that we're in, and I want to shift the culture. And so to me, that's social entrepreneurship. It's really big sea change about the way that we see and treat ourselves.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So what do you think is, for those who are listening, I think you embody that so clearly. But what I really find is that women don't always see that inside of themselves. Right? Like even when I was talking to a friend who's an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, and I was talking about like, I want to really work with women leaders. I want to support the supporters. I want to work with those who are out there making a difference. I want to be the one that coaches them to stay in that playing big space. Right. And she was like, she goes, I wouldn't use the word leader because like, I don't even think of myself as one. And I was like, wait, what? And I've started to really examine that a little bit and realize that that's in fact true, that like that word, this idea of leader isn't one that we as women often take on or identify with. And I'm saddened, like kind of breaks my heart a little bit, right? Because I want to see more women in leadership. And what that means to me is like fully self-expressed, playing full out, engaging consciously and in integrity for social impact. You know what I mean? But that might not be what we're associating with leadership.
Absolutely.
So what would you say to those who like, I'm sure are listening to you, I guess, do you think of yourself as a leader? Let me start with that simple question.
I do. I think of myself as someone who has inherent leadership. And I say that because I begrudged it for so long. When I was in elementary school, I went to this private elementary school. It's private Christian school, of course. Right. And they gave out awards at the end of every year, and they were based on characters in Bible verses. And
wow, you were really in it, girl. You were really in it.
I was fully inundated, fully in it. And there are a lot of gifts in that too, right?
Yeah.
But every single year, I got the award Deborah Strong Leader. So much so that when I started 5th grade, I was like, could you give me a different award at the end of the year? Like, I don't want Deborah Strong Leader. It's embarrassing. I always would like something else. So for me, it was just a reckoning of this is who I am. I walk into a room, and as soon as there's some sort of like split up into groups and one of you is going to report back, people just look at me. I'm like, all right.
I guess I'm the one facilitating the circle.
I'm the one here. And of course, I love being in spaces where there's another leader. I mean, I relish in being able to lean back and be led. That doesn't happen very often. I have to set that up. And so I think part of it is just organically recognizing that is true of me. And it doesn't serve anybody else for me to deny the reality that I'm a leader.
That's a gift. Yeah.
Okay. Right. How can I use that in a way to show other people their strength? I think then it becomes more of a question of, then what kind of a leader and do I want to be? And can I be someone who leads from behind?
Yeah. And can you help other people lead? That's, I think, what I'm really looking at is how can we, you, me, those in this work, help other women see them, even if they didn't get that award every year and their leadership looks totally different. And they're like more like the woman who wrote the book Quiet, you know what I mean? Or on introverted leadership. Like, I forget her name. I can look that up and put that in the show notes as well. How can we inspire others to lead in their own way, but to definitely lead because we need it? That's how I feel.
And so often we are leading by two things to say about that. We're leading by example. We're leading by being a person who's living in integrity or living with authenticity. We may have no idea the impact that we're making. So that may not be identified by the culture as leadership, but wow, it is doing everything that leadership is intended to do. The other piece of that is, and you mentioned this, and you talking about strong relationships. And you started this conversation by saying that my dear friend Seane Corn told you about my work and about my character. I am surrounded by badass mofos. I am surrounded by, there's a group of us, we're sister wives. We're like in it together. And Seane Corn's one of them. Nikki Myers is one of them. Carrie Kelly is one of them. I think it is incredibly important to surround yourself with women who are in their power and women who can own their capacity without apology and without qualification. And there's no, I'm sorry, because those are the kind of women that can call you up. Right? They can call you into your talent and your skill and your ability. And when you are surrounded by women who feel insecure, they're more likely to compare themselves to you and not to be able to celebrate who you are, not to be able to champion you.
Right. And call you out.
And call you out. Exactly.
When you are out of integrity and you're not actually expressing who you really are.
Yes. We call that spiritual consent. You have spiritual consent to tell me the fierce truth. And I need to hear it.
And I need to hear it. Okay, beautiful. So one is just that you can lead in a million different ways. If you're showing up with integrity and authenticity, you are leading. So if you're listening, people, and you are living your life true to yourself, you are already leading. And secondly is, and I talk about this a lot, is like, I call it my support crew. Like, who are my girls? And I have a really core set who, like, I feel exactly what you said. They're grounded in who they are. And all the fundamental ways really love who they are, even if they have their own surprise attacks, like we mentioned. Nobody's perfect or free from this. But there's a way in which we celebrate the hell out of our victories and we push each other to the next level of our own like greatness in our own self-expression. So community, there's a piece that's, just internal. And then there's definitely a piece that's external, like who we surround ourselves by. It's beautiful. Okay. So in closing, first of all, I want to talk to you about 1,000 more things. So we might have to do this again. You have so many stories. I can just tell there's just so many stories that we didn't get to. But I want you just to, in closing, if there's anything else you want to share with people about the beautiful work of the Embody Love Movement or your own private practice or what you're up to right now, I'd love you just to be able to share that with our listeners.
Thanks for that. My website is drmelodymore.com, and I try to continually put up my schedule and where I'm traveling and teaching. Because again, as someone who strives to be present I like to teach whatever's coming through, whatever I'm learning in that moment, whatever I feel like this could be of benefit. One of my friends and teachers is Marianne Williamson. And I love the way she talks about you're 2 steps ahead of someone. And for me, that's very empowering because it means I don't have to be fully evolved and enlightened in order to teach and to share what I know. I just have to be 2 steps ahead of somebody. And also helps me empower other women to teach and to share and to write and to be what they know so far. So if there's any way in which what I've experienced could be of benefit to you, please find me at that website and find what I'm teaching online. I'm teaching body image breakthrough courses. I'm also teaching about facilitation and about holding space, traveling and teaching those things too. And with Embody Love Movement, you are welcome to become a facilitator. There's a 2-part training. So there's a 15-hour in-person training, as I mentioned, by one of the trainers, amazing women. And those are all over the country and some in the UK and in Australia as well. And then there's a 4-hour part 2 intensive with me. And I really tried in these 4 hours of video recordings to tell you all the tools I've learned and the skills I've learned over time in my own internal work and in treating clients in recovery for negative body image, like the not-enoughness and eating disorders, of how to heal, how to recover, how to repair, and how to be a lady boss. Because the program of Embody Love Movement, the way that it works is once you're a trained facilitator, you take these workshops into your own community in all the ways that you can and serve the girls and women in your community that way. So I try to give all that I can around here's how to do that successfully and effectively in your own life. So please follow me, like me, all the things, so that we can stay in contact with each other. And I'd love to hear from your listeners about any questions they have about this conversation or ways to work with me moving forward, Sage.
Awesome. I'll put the links to all of that in the show notes. And I really feel like you've given people an invitation, a real invitation, Melody, to express themselves more fully and to show up and lead more completely in the way that serves them. So thank you so much for doing this. And I can't wait to learn more from you myself.
Same here. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. Thanks, Sage.
Thank you so much for listening to Naked Conversations. Yay! It really means the world to me every time you show up. And if you want to know more about how to work with me personally and my coaching, you can check that out over at sagebhobbs.com. You can also get some great free resources over there about how to make powerful requests and many blog posts full of resources for living a naked life, as well as grab a copy of my book, Naked Communication: Courageously Create the Relationships You Really Want. Thanks again. See you next time.